same situation that we had during the report out on the Commerce Committee. During the report out on Commerce Committee, new information was received, and we had removed all of the Art Commission funding for 2027. This was a $1 million removal, and that we found out was a 1-for-1 match. And so the action taken was to remove that $1 million from the Art Commission, leaving zero. In addition, the action taken was a $500,000 transfer then to the public broadcasting, and that brought a total there of $1 million. Of that, $500,000 would be used for Smoky Hill, and the other $500,000 is distributed to other stations. We went ahead and passed that out of committee, subject to, I told the Ways and Means Committee we would bring that back to this committee for consideration, knowing now we have additional information that was declared. So I'd like to make a motion that we add back into the Art Commission $500,000. And then with the match, that could go up to $1 million with the match. And then I also, to fund that, remove $500,000 from Smoky Hills Public Broadcasting. And that leaves them the original $500,000, and that is distributed how they see fit. That $500,000 was not requested. The additional $500,000 for the Smoky Hill Public Broadcasting was not requested by the agency. And so that is the motion. And do I have any discussion on the motion? Do I have a second on the motion? Second by Senator Owens. Now we'll have any discussion on the second. Seeing none, all in favor? Say aye. 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 Opposed? No. You'd like to be recorded? I would like to be recorded. Okay, thank you. It will be. So I will then take this information and give that back to Ways and Means and explain what we did here. So we thank you for allowing me to have that motion, or that point of personal privilege to take care of that issue. We are now on the hearing for Senate Bill 418. That's enhancing by right housing development to act to provide streamlined permit approval. And so we have a little explanation of what that is. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Amelia Kovar-Donahue, Assistant Reviser. Senate Bill number 418 relates to new housing developments and would provide kind of 5 components that I've listed for you there on the first page of my bill brief. It would enact the By Right Housing Development Act that would provide a streamlined permit approval process for by right housing developments. It would also allow for third-party review of new residential construction development documents and inspection of improvements. It would also require political subdivisions to allow certain building provisions for single-family residences of a certain size. It would exclude owner-initiated rezoning to a single-family residential district from certain protest petition provisions. And fifth, it would provide that all land within the corporate limits of a city to be considered zoned for single-family residential use. And I'll tell you a little bit more about each of those specific provisions. The first is new Section 1, which would enact the By Right Housing Development Act. It would provide that all proposed housing developments of single-family homes, townhouses, and ADUs or accessory dwelling units that meet certain criteria outlined in zoning code and land use regulations would be approved by right without the need of discretionary review or approval by planning commissions, zoning boards, or other regulatory bodies. A complete application that demonstrates that such development meets the criteria outlined in code and land use regulations shall be deemed approved unless the application is denied within 15 days of receipt by the permitting or regulatory authority. Regulatory authorities shall monitor compliance with approved by right housing developments to ensure adherence to regulations and standards. And non-compliance may still result in enforcement actions such as fines, penalties, and project modifications to bring the development into compliance. There is also an appeal process for denied applications that are provided in the bill. The next section relates to third-party review. New Section 2 would allow for third-party review of new residential construction development documents and inspection of improvements if a governing body of a political subdivision elects to be subject to those provisions of the section. It's an opt-in provision that a political subdivision would need to opt into these provisions. If such a regulatory authority does not approve, conditionally approve, or deny a development document within 15 days of receipt, any required review of that document may be performed by a third party, and that is a person other than the applicant or a person whose work is the subject of the application. This person must be employed by the regulatory authority to review development documents, be employed by another political subdivision if the regulatory authority has approved that person, or a licensed professional engineer. Similarly, if a regulatory authority doesn't conduct a required development inspection within 15 days after receipt of the request for the inspection, that inspection also may be conducted by a person other than the owner or a person whose work is the subject of the inspection. And then again, that they are, the person needs to be certified to inspect the building, be employed by the regulatory authority as a building inspector, be employed by another political subdivision as a building inspector, or be a licensed professional engineer. A third party who reviews development documents or conducts a development inspection shall review the document, conduct the inspection, and take all other related actions in accordance with the law, and no later than 15 days after completion of the review or inspection provide notice to the regulatory authority. There's also an appeal process for that process. The next section is new Section 3, and it has to do with building provisions for single-family residences of a certain size. This new section would require that all political subdivisions allow certain building provisions for new construction of single-family residences that are less than 3,000 square feet in size, and that 3,000 square feet is total livable floor area or gross floor area minus garages and basements. For such new construction, all political subdivisions shall allow the use of certain versions of the 2018 edition of the Internal Residential Code, shall allow construction of single-car garages, allow only one side of architectural finish, and allow a minimum residential lot size of 3,000 square feet, subject to any reasonable setback requirements that avoid unwarranted hardship, yet protect the public welfare and safety. Section 4 would amend KSA 12-757 to provide that whenever a property owner initiates a rezoning of such property owner's property to a single-family residential district, such amendment shall require notice by publication and hearing in a manner similar to what's already provided in subsection B of that statute, but shall not require written notice and shall not be subject to protest petitions provided in subsection F. And in the statute, the protest petition provision that, let's say that 5 times fast. The provision itself is that it allows for a protest petition against an amendment for rezoning if within 14 days after the conclusion of the public hearing, There is a petition signed by owners of record of 20% or more of the real property proposed to be rezoned, that be filed. And if that happens, then the ordinance or resolution adopting a rezoning amendment shall not be passed except by at least a 3/4 vote of all members of the governing body. So, but what this provision is saying is that a property owner who is seeking the rezoning for single family for just their property is not subject to that protest petition provision. And then the last section, section 5, would amend KSA 12-758 to provide that all land within the corporate limits of a city shall be considered zoned for single-family residential use, in addition to any other zoning that may have been adopted by the city for such land. The provision would not limit a city's ability to impose reasonable regulations regarding to setbacks or development performance standards, utility standards, and those kinds of things. And the bill would take effect from and after publication in the statute book. I'd be happy to stand for questions.
Thank you very much for that explanation. Do we have questions? Yes, Senator Falscado.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That was a wonderful presentation. Thank you. So the single family residential area. So 2 questions. So what's the major difference of a homeowners association versus the establishment of, and so the single family area, so would it exclude certain businesses in the area? So
I'm not sure exactly how to answer that question. With many of these provisions are having to do with the city or the regulatory authorities' regulation of these areas. There is a provision within the by right housing development process that does clearly provide that that section does not invalidate or limit the legality, enforceability, or effective restrictive covenants or condominium association or homeowners association regulations. So it should not affect those.
Any other questions? Yes, Senator Reichman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. It says it allows for the third-party review of the new residential the construction development. Could you give me an example when they talk about a third-party review? Who's going to be looking over these? Thank you.
Mr. Chair, possibly some conferees might be able to add a little more context to this. I can tell you what's specifically provided in the bill. On page 3, there is kind of a better laid out description of who the third party would be. And for example, for development documents, the person who could perform this would be a person other than the applicant and other than a person whose work is the subject of the application, so there wouldn't be a conflict. But that person also needs to be either employed by the regulatory authority to review development documents or be employed by another political subdivision to review documents if the regulatory authority has approved that person, or the person needs to be a licensed professional engineer as defined by 74-7003 and amendments thereto.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. We'll move on. Do we have a fiscal note on the bill? I didn't see it. So it is in the, everybody has one of these in their bill. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, our first proponent would be the author of the bill, and that would be Senator T.J. Rose. Senator, welcome to our committee.
Thank you, Chair. Vice Chair Ranking and
Pardon me, I did want to say we do have 10 conferees, and so we'd like to limit that to 3 minutes if all possible. Thank you very much.
my name is TJ Rose, Kansas District 35 in Southern Johnson County. It is my honor to share with the committee this solution to the housing affordability crisis with you today. This bill has no fiscal note, is that what it says? No fiscal note? Okay, just want to make sure it said that. There is a fiscal note? What? Is it 0? Yeah. Now it's really clear that delay. This bill lowers the cost of new home construction using common sense, free market principles. It focuses on helping the supply side of housing catch up with demand, resulting in a lower entry price point into homeownership. The bill has no fiscal note. The bill was inspired by a conversation with my oldest son, who's part of Generation Z. He said 6 simple words to me: my generation cannot afford homeownership. That inspired me to have more conversations with builders, city leaders, realtors, the business community, and free market advocates to create this legislation. I found that in having these conversations, we all had a shared goal of lowering the cost of new home construction by speeding up the construction process and preventing unnecessary delays and decreasing the cost of materials and land. That is what this bill accomplishes. You can see in my written testimony the benefits of homeownership for Kansas families and businesses. I hope that everyone in this room has a common goal of lower construction costs to make homeownership more attainable. And I asked the committee to decipher between opposition testimony that makes the legislation better by improving the implementation of the concepts and opposition testimony that unnecessarily increases the cost of new home construction, pricing Kansans out of homeownership. Together, let's make Kansas a state where this most basic element of the American dream is affordable. For more information, you can see my written testimony, and I'm available for questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you very much for your testimony. We appreciate the timeliness of that. Okay, second proponent is Emily Emin. Is Emily here? There he is. She's State Policy Counsel for Pacific Legal Foundations, and welcome to the committee.
Thank you so much for this opportunity to testify today. Again, my name is Emily Amin, and I serve as State Policy Counsel at Pacific Legal Foundation. PLF is a nonprofit.
Your microphone on.
Can you hear me?
Okay,
There we go. Sorry about that. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Emily Amin, and I serve as State Policy Counsel at Pacific Legal Foundation. PLF is a nonprofit public interest law firm dedicated to defending Americans' individual liberties when they're threatened by government overreach and abuse. For the last 50 years, we've been working tirelessly both in courts and legislators across the country to help achieve this goal. And nearly a third of the bills that we have helped pass have related to property rights. Today, SB 418 includes several very important reforms, all of which we support, but I want to mostly focus on its by-right housing provision. By-right housing means that if the local zoning code allows something to be built on a certain parcel, then it's automatically approved by the permitting authority to be built there. The caveat to this is that the project must still meet all of the criteria set out in the zoning code and any land use requirements. So this provision does not exempt these projects from any additional permitting requirements. At its core, this section is aimed at preventing unjust discretionary reviews where someone at the local level postpones or even denies a project that should otherwise be approved because they don't want the project to take place for their own subjective reasons. This section prevents those types of reviews from happening and provides an injured party with some sort of recourse if they do. It's also worth noting that this provision is not meant to interfere with HOAs or other types of restrictive covenants. This section of the bill is meant to preserve all local requirements for what, where, and how something is built. This is merely an accountability mechanism for localities, not a mandate. On that note, I would also like to briefly touch on the third-party review provision in Section 2 of this bill. This provision would act as an optional safeguard for localities if they could not keep up with new development. At a time when so many Kansans are struggling to find affordable housing, projects that meet local requirements should not be stalled because of abuse of discretion. So for these reasons, PLF respectfully supports the passage of SB 418.
Thank you very much. We'll stand for questions at a later date. Thank you. Okay. Our next conferee is Samuel Hooper, Institute for Justice. Samuel? He's online. Welcome, Samuel.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Thank you for this opportunity to testify. I'm Samuel Hooper, Legislative Counsel at the Institute for Justice. We're a nonprofit public interest law firm that works nationwide to protect private property rights and economic liberty. We very strongly support Senate Bill 418 because it is a property rights bill. It's grounded in the principle that when a property owner follows the rules that local government has already adopted, then they should be allowed to use their property accordingly without needing additional political permission. So one of the biggest obstacles we all know to housing is the kind of uncertainty that's often built into the approval process. So even when zoning technically allows housing, often if the real decision happens later, whether that's through discretionary hearings or delays or protest petitions or case-by-case judgment, that creates uncertainty that just makes housing slower to build, more expensive, and impossible at scale sometimes. It drives up costs, reduces housing supply, and can even undermine confidence in the law itself. So by restoring by right development, as Senate Bill 418 does, if a proposed home, whether that's a single family home, townhome, accessory dwelling unit, complies with the zoning and land use rules that are already on the books, then approval, we believe, and as this bill says, should follow as a matter of right. And this bill reinforces that principle with clear timelines and objective standards and meaningful judicial review if permits are denied despite compliance. It doesn't eliminate local standards, it just simply ensures that those standards are applied consistently, predictably, and lawfully. So it protects property owners, it reduces conflict, and it promotes housing affordability, but crucially, it does it not through government mandates or subsidies, but simply by removing unnecessary legal friction. And for these reasons, the Institute for Justice very strongly supports the bill. I'm grateful for the opportunity to testify and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Our next conferee is Tanner Temple from the State Director of Americans for Prosperity. Welcome, Tanner.
Thank you, Mr. Test, 1, 2, 3. There we go. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, I appreciate the opportunity to testify in support of this bill. For generations, the American dream has meant owning a home, having a place to put down roots. I think of Little Home on the Prairie, even the Homestead Act when we first came to Kansas and our barren land, especially where I was from in western Kansas. So home ownership is still one of the most reliable ways for working families to build wealth and achieve independence. Yet for too many Kansans today, that dream is slipping out of reach, not because they're working hard, but because government rules have made it harder and more expensive to build homes in the first place. SB 418 is a direct response to that problem. SB 418 is about enforcing a simple principle. When the rules are clear and the project follows them, government should say yes. Too often in Kansas, housing that complies with zoning and safety codes is still delayed or denied through discretionary processes, political pressure, or neighborhood opposition. SB 418 establishes a by right approval process so that is, if a proposed single-family home, townhouse, or accessory dwelling unit meets the written standards, it must be approved. No extra hearings, no moving goalposts, and no bureaucratic slow walking. A key part of this bill is the minimum lot size reform. Minimum lot sizes are often presented as neutral planning tools, but in practice, they are frequently used to block smaller, more affordable homes. SB 418 limits that abuse by ensuring that local governments cannot use oversized requirements as a backdoor veto on housing. Zoning remains in place, safety codes remain in place, but once these standards are met, local governments cannot quietly price working families out of market by requiring unnecessarily large and expensive lots. The bill also makes clear that accessory dwelling units, ADUs, are a legitimate and important form of housing. ADUs are things such as backyard cottages, garage apartments, or basement units. If you think of a mother-in-law suite that provide lower-cost housing options while fitting into existing neighborhoods. Under SB 418, ADUs that meet zoning and building codes must be approved by right. Just like any other compliant housing, cities would no longer be able to single them out for special permit or political delays. Taken together, these reforms increase a housing supply without eliminating local standards or compromising safety. SB 14 does not abolish zoning, override homeowners associations, or force rezoning. It simply ensures that once the rules are set, they're applied fairly and consistently. This bill promotes affordability, respects property rights, and restores common sense to the housing approval process. So I would say build, baby, build. And for those reasons, I urge you to support this bill.
Thank you very much. Our next conferee will be Will Reuter, the Executive Vice President on behalf of the Kansas Building and Industry Association. Oh, excuse me, but I'll let you go ahead. I overlooked Andrew Weens, but go ahead. You're up.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for convening the hearing today. My name is Will Reuter. I serve as the Executive Vice President of the Home Builders Association of Greater Kansas City, here on behalf of the Kansas Building Industry Association. While I do not have a formal endorsement of the bill as written to offer you today, not yet board approved, I do come in support of this housing dialogue that exists now in the Kansas State Senate. The costs of inaction are being paid by would-be homebuyers across the state of Kansas today. In a recently released report by the National Association of Home Builders, for every $1,000 added to the cost of new construction in the state of Kansas, 1,565 Kansas families are priced out of the market. Today, 73.4% of Kansas households cannot afford median price new construction in the state of Kansas. We all recognize, I would hope, that a key driver in the housing crisis, the affordability crisis that we face, is simply a lack of suitable supply that exists to meet the rising demand of a growing economy, particularly in the significant economic development wins that the state of Kansas has experienced. Our housing production is not able to keep up, not due to lack of capital, not due to lack of desire, and certainly not for lack of demand. It is simply a market unable to meet the moment. And so SB 418 certainly identifies many of the key cost drivers that are preventing new home construction from meeting that demand. And so with that, I will conclude this commentary and submit myself to questions at the appropriate time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your testimony. And now, Mr. Andrew Weens on behalf of Wichita Affordable Housing. Sorry about that, Mr. Weens.
No problem. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Appreciate the opportunity to testify today. My name is Andrew Weens, and I'm testifying today on behalf of Wichita Affordable Housing, LLC. It's a company dedicated to expanding access to affordable and attainable housing for Kansas families, starting in the Wichita area. They operate a social impact fund, which provides low-interest loans to developers to get affordable housing into the city of Wichita and beyond. As you heard from the previous conferees, Kansas faces a housing affordability challenge, and one way to address that is to increase the supply of affordable housing. And we think this bill does a good job of addressing that issue by allowing folks who are following the rules to go ahead and build more houses. In today's market, delay can be a hidden housing tax, as you heard earlier. Every additional month spent waiting for approvals increases costs, expenses, and material prices. And those costs are ultimately passed along to renters and would-be home buyers. So for many Kansas families, these added expenses put affordable housing out of reach, and we think SB 418 offers a practical, common sense solution through this by right housing approval process, while still respecting the ability of local governments to establish zoning rules and protecting property rights. So with that, I would be happy to stand for questions. We support this legislation, and I encourage you to consider it favorably at the appropriate time. I'll stand for questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our last proponent is Mr. Joe Woodard and friends on WebEx.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. My friends aren't with me today. I was told that we could only do one at a time, but if you check your written comments, you'll see a whole slew of people. My name is Joe Woodward. I'm a volunteer, my wife and I, with Safe Families for Children, which the state of Kansas has so generously funded. Thank you for that. Before we talk about housing, we need to talk about foster care. So foster care in Sedgwick County is something my wife and I have been involved in for many years, adoption, things like that. And recently we've learned how prevention is so important. So congratulations to the state of Kansas. Foster care numbers are going down, but in our county in Wichita, Sedgwick County, foster care is up 50% in the last decade. The solution for that is not better foster care. It's less foster care. It's more community support, which is why we've been so grateful to voluntarily watch the children of moms who are getting back on their feet in rehab, getting jobs, getting daycare, all the rest. But what I've learned along this journey is that these are complicated issues. And so often it's things like family homelessness that actually leads to foster care. We've had a couple of situations personally where
With just a moment, we have point of order.
Mr. Chairman, what bill is he speaking to?
Supposedly, we're on Senate Bill 418. Are you on Senate Bill 418 or are you on a different bill?
Senate Bill 418.
Okay, we're having trouble following it for 418.
All right, I'll get to it. All right, here we go. Thank you for that. So the mothers of the children that we've served have experienced homelessness. And so usually when you face a problem like that, you look for a solution. And so as we looked for solutions, there's a lot of these throughout the country. And let's be real, really good people will just invite people into their basements. We've done that a few times, but it's been a barrier that's not sustainable for many reasons. But we've seen models across the country where people will actually add an accessory dwelling unit in their backyard. And I guess YouTube heard me talking about this, and I started getting ads all the time for these backyard tiny homes. So we mustered up the courage, and we started the approval process to put an ADU in our backyard to support the moms of the children who we were serving. And we were told by the city of Bel Air, which is just outside of Wichita, that ADUs were not allowed under any circumstance. And I was like, what? Isn't this a free country? So we were a little bit disappointed. So that's a personal reason. But I think in addition to, average everyday people getting to be a part of the solution by adding additional housing in their backyards for ministry reasons, a good friend of mine, Reverend Kevis Harding, who you'll see in your packet, he's actually taking an economic mobility approach to this. So he serves residents in Northeast Wichita, and their model, he bought a tiny home 5 months ago and is still waiting on approval. I think it's allowed, but the approval process has taken 5 months. Their model is to actually put these in the backyards of homeowners, help them earn additional income. So here's some math. A lot of the family homelessness groups, the minimum rent they can find in Wichita is $650 per month. You can build a tiny home for $40,000, rent it out for $450, so you're above that 1% rule, and that's $200 less than the single one-bedroom apartments across Wichita. And the win-win is beautiful because not only does the person get cheaper rent, they also have community support with people right there who are with them on their journey. And that homeowner's also earning a couple $100 a month in additional income. So you'll see some more examples. There's really a movement in Wichita of everyday folks who have said, hey, we've got extra space. We are willing to walk with families, maybe not in our basement, but in our backyard. And so we're really excited about Senate Bill 418. And we'd love to see more of these backyard tiny homes in Wichita to address affordable housing and therefore prevent foster care. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Committee, we also have 3 written proponents who are in your packets. We'll move on to the neutral, and then we'll take questions after the neutral. Our neutral is Mr. Jack Messer from City of Overland Park. Jack, welcome to the committee.
Thank you. Great to be here today, Mr. Chairman and committee members. I'm Jack Messer. I'm an assistant city manager with the City of Overland Park. Appreciate the opportunity to speak today. Housing has a critical role to play with respect to the quality of life for Overland Park residents. The city is pursuing opportunities to expand choices for residents, workers, and aging households by offering more types of developments that include housing and providing opportunities for different types in new and existing neighborhoods. A keen focus on design ensures infill and redevelopment is in harmony with established neighborhoods. These are direct policy statements in Overland Park's new comprehensive plan, Framework OP. I'm here today to provide testimony that's neutral in nature on Senate Bill 14. I think that the bill aspires to achieve the policy positions that I just articulated. I appreciate Senator Rose, as we've had the opportunity to discuss this important issue over the past several months, and he has had a laser focus and a commitment to provide more single-family housing throughout Kansas. My reasoning for staking out a neutral position on the bill is that, in our view, it does achieve the opportunity to deliver more single-family housing through its by right provisions. There are some aspects of the bill that limit the very necessary aspect of infrastructure design and appropriate land planning that offset our approval of that. So we've suggested in our written testimony some possible amendments, and we're hopeful the committee will consider those and modify the bill's focus to the elements of zoning regulation without hindering the proper delivery of property definition or platting and infrastructure planning. We understand this may be a radical approach as well, that our general support may be different than what other cities may have in their view. But in terms of a positive approach, I would have to start that the overall policy that a single family home with proper standards ought to be able to be built anywhere in a city. This broad policy is one that Overland Park agrees with Senator Rose's intentions and the intentions of the by right provisions. We have a common problem in Overland Park and across the United States. We did a Johnson County housing study in 2018. It told us that we need to build over 1,400 units every year. We're building 700. There's a problem. We don't necessarily think zoning control is the only contributing factor to that. But perhaps it's time to examine that as an underlying factor and address it. We also are not promoting the wholesale elimination of zoning controls. But it seems relatively less threatening to allow single-family homes to be built where the market may want to build them. So I think that has the added benefit of providing efficient growth management, opening development where infrastructure and services exist, and lessening the driving of growth to peripheries of cities. Also, we understand the bill proposes to eliminate state requirements associated with protest petitions for single-family homes. Okay, I'll wrap up. I'm sorry I've taken a little more time. We agree with this provision. We've had recent experience where we tried to rezone a single-family home, small single-family home, had great opposition. In the face of significant political opposition, our council was able to do that. So I'll wrap up here, and hopefully the testimony helps in your deliberations. We do believe that reducing zoning restrictions on single-family zone is appropriate, and we're hopeful you'll consider that some of the proposed amendments might allow for an appropriate review of infrastructure and other property definition in the platting process. Thank you.
Committee, we also have two written neutral only. We're going to go ahead and get the opponents that are here today. We have two opponents that are testifying before us, and that is Nathan Eberlein, and that's Executive Director of League of Kansas Municipalities. Welcome, Nathan.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. I've been in this position for 3 years, and from the time that I've started in circling all around the state, it has been a consistent theme talking to local officials.
Your mic.
It is. I'm just a little bit speaking on top of it. Give me just a second. I will slouch. Okay. All right. Our cities very much share an interest in improving our access to housing. That has been a constant theme and one that we are continuing to work on. But SB 418 substitutes state mandates for the local responsibility that currently exists. It's regulating from Topeka downward with a number of negative effects. This bill eliminates local accountability without creating state accountability. Our current system requires that local zoning decisions are made by elected officials who must face voters. SB 418 shifts power to third-party reviewers, the courts, and applicants who are insulated from public input. If and when infrastructure fails, traffic worsens, or neighborhoods destabilize, the state is not responsible, the developer is not accountable, and the city is prohibited from intervening. That is not limited government, but it is unaccountable government. And it undermines the principle of valuing government that's closest to the people, responding to the needs of the people. Kansas City's already approved most housing today when it complies with the adopted zoning. Part of that became very clear in last year's bill, which you guys passed, HB 2088, which made a number of changes that we would like to continue to see how those play out before making additional ones. In part because SB 418 goes much further. It imposes the 15-day approval clock, and that is regardless of the application complexity, regardless of staffing capacity, and regardless of the infrastructure constraints. Most cities across the state have small staffs, part-time inspectors, and shared regional personnel. SB 418 can trigger automatic approval, which creates legal exposure and safety risks, not efficiency. SB 418 weakens long-standing notice and protest protections in Kansas law. Property owners who bought land relying on adopted zoning lose meaningful rights. They lose the protest petition rights. They lose the ability to participate before the impacts occur. Individual property rights are absolutely critical. They're core to who we are. But that right also includes responsibility to those who are around us. By declaring all single-family, zoned single-family as a radical shift in Kansas zoning law, as 5C states, all land within the corporate limits of a city shall be considered zoned or single-family residential use. And this has a significant effect when you look at industrial land, commercial corridors, downtown cores. It conflicts with comprehensive planning, infrastructure development, and our efforts to work with the business community for additional growth. As I mentioned before, this proposal creates government without accountability. Our cities want to be good partners in advancing housing in Kansas, but this bill is not the solution. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Our next opponent is Amanda Stanley with the Deputy City Attorney for the City of Olathe. Amanda, welcome.
Mr. Chair. Thank you so much. My name is Amanda Stanley. I am the Deputy City Attorney for the City of Olathe. Nice to see you guys all again. So today I am testifying in opposition to Senate Bill 418. In Olathe, we support practical pro-housing reform. We allow ADUs by right in residential zone. We allow by right housing in areas that is zoned for it where it's appropriate. We allow the 3,000 square foot lot. We can turn around people that are coming with their permits ready to go and ready to build. We turn around in days. We can get inspections done the next day. But this bill goes much further than that with its provision to allow residential zoning in any other zoning category. That is a structural change to how zoning works, and it upends decades of deliberate comprehensive planning in Olathe. Not all cities are the same. Olathe is not Overland Park. Approximately 74% of Olathe is already zoned residential, but we have very intentionally planned and preserved large industrial and commercial areas. Those areas support jobs, services, and a tax base that allows us to deliver our municipal services efficiently. We care very deeply about time to market in Olathe for both housing and businesses. Predictably planned locations are what allows our projects to move forward quickly with fewer disputes. That predictability is what makes development feasible in Olathe. When single-family housing is allowed everywhere, the market will predictably favor housing first as you expand, which Olathe continues to expand as we are a rapidly growing city. Housing is often easier to finance and faster to build, and in the short term, in some areas, that can look like a win. But we continually hear in parts of our city, like the West, when am I getting a grocery store? When am I getting a pharmacy? That's a chicken and an egg. You gotta have the heads on beds to support the commercial, but then you gotta have the land available to build the grocery store when you have enough core density. And so we're seeing that now. We're getting those services finally in the west part of Olathe, but you have to have that comprehensive plan so that land is available when that time is to occur. That's better overall for your tax base and the health of your city. When your residents can spend their money in their local area, you get their sales tax that allows you to redistribute your property tax versus your commercial residential to allow a healthier overall growth. So once industrial or commercial land is converted to housing, you rarely recover it back for those grocery stores, those pharmacies, those industrial uses. And when that land's gone, so are those services. With our planning framework, when you upend it by allowing residential everywhere, the result is not efficiency. It can be conflict. Neighborhood disputes increase, expectations clash, and projects slow down. Most residents don't routinely check what the zoning looks like next door when they build a house or when they buy one. So single family is allowed in areas that were intentionally intended to be a buffer between our industrial zone and our residential zone. And ultimately the industrial zone develops into the industrial zone. That results in very contentious city council meetings where lots of residents show up protesting that industrial project that's going in. There's probably no more fun hearing to be at than those types of angry disputes. Planning and well-distributed planning helps divide that out so that you decrease those. We're not resistant to housing. Like I said, we support many of those, and I know I'm out of time, so I'm gonna just close it up real quick. But we would just ask that if you move forward with this bill, that you remove that piece so that we can continue to have our comprehensive planning. Happy to talk to more of you about it at any of your spare time, and I will stand for questions whenever you're ready.
Thank you very much for being here, Amanda. Okay, committee, we do have about a dozen or so opponent written testimony, so look that in your folder, and we do have questions. And Senator Klemp, did you have a question? Yep. Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Rose, would you come up, please? So thank you for putting forth legislation to minimize barriers to entry for single family, reducing the age of home ownership, the ability to set roots, increasing affordability. One of the questions I have, and from listening to the opponents and the neutrals as well, which bring up some points that need maybe your thoughts on it a little bit. So we'll use Lansing, Kansas, my hometown. So you have a situation, there's a lot in an industrial area. Does this allow you to build a home in that space? And then the second part of that would be, it seems like there's probably some things that a lot of the opponents would like to see. I think if we were minimizing barriers to entry and doing things that allowed for minimizing regulatory issues and moving fast, we wouldn't have a need for this, but that's not happening. But there might be some middle ground that might get everybody excited about this bill. So would you run with that a little bit?
Yeah. Thank you for the question. As far as building a single family residence on an industrial lot, the concept behind that is that it increases the supply of land. And as basic economics tells us, when we increase the supply, the price goes down. And when you drive around the state, whether it's Johnson County or your small town, when the speed limit goes down to 45 miles an hour and you enter small town America, there are single family residences everywhere. America was built upon the idea that there is no greater priority than the single family house: water, food, and shelter. And like you said, as far as some of the opposition testimony, if city policy was not driving up the cost of new home construction and pricing people out of homeownership, this bill would not be necessary. When you are writing your newsletter this summer, and when the House members are campaigning this summer, they're not going to go door-to-door campaigning on "I preserve city planning." They will be campaigning on "I made housing more affordable. I enabled the young generation to attain homeownership." Every 20-something I've shared this bill with, their face lights up, and they say, "Please pass that. I want to own a home." As my written testimony says, 72% of people in their 20s want to own a home in the next 6 years.
One quick follow-up.
Follow-up.
Yeah, real quick. Yeah. So the comment that I felt was relevant, since we got to hear everybody talk today, was putting a home in an industrial area and the creation of really a lot of negative energy when they're trying to go to a zoning conversation. It feels like that has some merit. Can you touch on that briefly?
Thank you for the question. The bill has made it to this point through conversations with everybody here. And these conversations will continue. Today's hearing is the latest conversation, but when I leave this hearing, I will be scheduling meetings with the proponents, the neutral, the opponents, and we are going to perfect this legislation so that all the cities, as best as we can, we're not going to agree on everything, but as best as we can, we're going to respect the will of the cities and make it good legislation that they can live with the common goal of reducing the cost of new home construction so that more Kansans can attain home ownership.
Senator Owens.
Senator Rose, thanks for being here and proposing this. Quick question. Your testimony, was that written by AI? Just kidding. Little inside joke from Public Health the other day.
Honestly, it was not.
Okay. But my real question, this will lower the cost of materials. Explain that to me, like tie that into what we've heard.
Thank you for the question. Thank you, Chair. I should be doing that the whole time. There's a section in the bill that talks about for houses that are less than 3,000 square feet in size. And it says that cities have to allow the 2018 code, either their version or another city's version or the basic 2018 code. The reason for that, a lot of cities are adopting the 2024 code. And Will Reuter can speak to this more than I could, but what builders tell me is that going from the 2018 code, and this is a totally foreign concept maybe for my colleagues that represent a rural area, but in large cities, cities are going from the 2018 building code to the 2024 building code, and builders tell me that increases the cost of every home by $30,000 because, and it's for energy reasons, it's not for safety. It's R rating on windows, R rating on insulation. 2018 homes are well built, they're safe, and there's no reason to price Kansas out of home ownership by demanding the 2024 code.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'll be quick. So, Senator Rose, you did an excellent job.
Thank you.
And I feel the passion for this legislation. And what got my attention is when you open your statement with your son making a comment. And I have daughters, too, and most of their friends, they live in downtown Wichita. They want to live in the apartments and do that life. But that single home, to me, it's still what it's all about. So what would be the major opposition that you're going to work on? And did I hear someone mention tiny homes? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for the question, and thank you, Chair. The area where it's easiest to work with the opposition on is the part about single family everywhere inside city limits. And I'll work with the city of Olathe on that. The points that really drive down the cost of new home construction are what speed up the process, that's the buy right. And the third party review, it's important to note that that is optional. By default, the cities are opted out. They have the opportunity to opt in if they consider it to be a benefit. And that's been my heart throughout developing this legislation is I want this legislation to make life easier for cities. When we eliminate the right to a protest petition on a single family house, that makes it easier on the city council because they don't have to deal with the legal friction that we've heard about. So the real negotiable part is that allowing houses anywhere inside city limits. So.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Did I hear someone say that they wanted to build tiny homes? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. That was some of the virtual testimony, and that is one of the aspects of the legislation. It expands access to what's called the ADU. That stands for Alternative Dwelling Unit. Yeah, and the idea behind that is it increases the supply of housing. Every new housing unit we add, it lowers the price.
Thank you very much. I know we had more questions, but we'll try to maybe do that tomorrow. If some of you can come back tomorrow, we'll start this earlier tomorrow, and then we'll go back in. Tomorrow, we do have a hearing on SB 335, and that is requiring public construction contracts to include mutual waivers of consensual damages. And then Thursday, we're going to have an audit report on the Angel tax credit and then an informational briefing on the Angel tax credit. So that'll be on Thursday. There will not be a meeting on Friday. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.